Their silence was the only mercy they offered. Admiral Kalen Thorne stood on the command deck of the fleet carrier Valediction, a ghost in a machine of ghosts. The star-dusted void pressed in on the panoramic bridge viewport, a cold and indifferent witness to the ultimatum scrolling across the central holotank. Beside him, the fleet-mind Logos manifested as a simple column of cobalt light, its synthesized voice a calm counterpoint to the tension coiling in Thorne's gut. The ultimatum was from the Core Directorate, a civilization that had carved its empire from ultimatums alone. Their terms were as stark as their gray angular ships surrender the civilian convoy, or the Directorate would sterilize it with particle lances. Time remaining until mandated compliance Logos stated its tone devoid of inflection. 71 hours, 59 minutes, and 47 seconds. The civilian convoy designated FCV-77 comprised 5 lumbering transports and a medical frigate. They carried 200,000 colonists and the cryopreserved genetic stock for a new world haven. They were now caged, held motionless by a core blockade at the system's primary jump point. Thorne's fleet, the 3rd Expeditionary, was the only help within range, a collection of destroyers and cruisers arrayed around the Valediction like steel thorns. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched, a distinction the core doctrine refused to acknowledge. They believe their will is a physical law of the universe. Thorne murmured, his gaze fixed on the enemy dispositions projected in the tank. They issue a decree, and reality is expected to conform. A statistically successful, if ethically bankrupt, strategy. Logos replied, their history shows a 94% compliance rate from 73 separate species. The remaining 6% no longer exist. A low hum vibrated through the deck plates, a constant reminder of the fusion core's power. Tactical Officer Eva Rostova stepped forward, her dark hair pulled into a severe knot. Admiral, the core fleet maintains a standard picket formation. Their projection is overwhelming force, but their sensor posture is lazy. They don't expect a fight. She tapped a control surface, highlighting the blockade's rigid geometry. They expect us to run the numbers and capitulate. It's what everyone else does. That's because their numbers are a lie, Thorne said, a hard edge in his voice. They present a closed ledger demanding payment in fear. We will present them with a different accounting. He turned to the column of light. Logos begin running passive sensor sweeps. I want to know the precise resonance frequency of their shield emitters. Don't ping them. Just listen. Their doctrine is a hammer. We will be the void. Inside the medical frigate St. Jude, a young girl named Alara pressed her face against the cold plasteel of a viewport. She watched the distant silver ships of the human fleet, so small against the infinite black. Her little brother Leo was asleep in a medbay cryopod, his body fighting a cellular decay that only the specialists on Haven could treat. The ship's intercom had gone quiet after the captain announced the delay. But the fear was a living thing, a scent of ozone and stale sweat that clung to the recycled air. She held a small hand-carved wooden bird, a gift from their father, and whispered to it. "Get us there safely," she pleaded to the silent stars. A flicker of static from the comms panel drew Thorne's attention. Engineering Chief Ben Carter's voice came through steady and calm. "Admiral, heat sinks are green across the board. The mirror lattice is ready for deployment on your command. It's a delicate instrument for this kind of work, but the math holds." "The math is all we have," Ben Thorne replied. "The Corps understands strength, but they've never faced an opponent who defines strength as a function of precision, not volume." He looked at Rostova. "Ava, prepare decoy drones. Standard profiles, but load them with our old transponder codes. Let's give their lazy sensors something to chew on." They will choke on the echoes we feed them. Rostova's fingers danced across her console, partitioning targeting data and spooling up launch sequences. The faint scent of ozone from the overworked processors sharpened the air on the bridge. Decoys, programmed Admiral. They'll read as a squadron of heavy frigates making a desperate flank run. The feint is only the first part of the equation. Thorn stated, his eyes never leaving the holotank. The Corps expect a charge or a retreat. They see this as a binary choice, a test of will. We are going to introduce a third variable doubt. Logos pulsed its cobalt light, a silent acknowledgement. The mirror lattice is calibrated, Admiral. Its potential for photonic reflection can create sensor ghosts of unprecedented fidelity. We can project an entire battle group where there is only empty space. The strategy was audacious. It relied on a technology designed for stellar energy collection, repurposed as the ultimate tool of misdirection. The lattice was a vast, deployable web of microscopic mirrors, each one precisely angled by the fleet mind to bend and redirect light and energy signatures. It couldn't fire a shot, but it could make the enemy see 1,000 ships where there were none. This is not a battle. It is a lesson in perspective. The Corps Commander 1 over Archon Valerius is a product of their system. Thorn explained, his voice low and clear for the bridge crew. He has never lost. He has never been forced to adapt. His entire career is built on the unshakable belief that his doctrine is infallible. He gestured to the rigid enemy formation. That arrogance is the seam we will break. Rostova nodded, her expression grim but determined. He won't know which threat is real until it's too late. He will not perceive a threat at all. Thorn corrected. He will perceive a tactical blunder on our part. A panicked, disorganized fleet scattering in the face of his invincible armada. A low chime echoed on the bridge, a priority notification from Logos. Admiral, I have isolated the shield resonance frequencies. However, I am detecting a secondary energy pattern from the Corps flagship, the Iron Edict. It is faint layered beneath their primary power signatures. The AI's light column wavered slightly, a rare sign of uncertainty. The pattern is rhythmic. It does not correlate with any known weapon drive or shield system. We will teach them that some things cannot be counted. Thorn filed the information away. An anomaly. Another variable. Logos keep monitoring that signature. Log every pulse. For now, we stick to the plan. He turned to face the viewport, the distant blockade lights like cruel, unblinking eyes. Launch the decoys. Ava, you have tactical command of the feint. Aye, Admiral. Ben began unfurling the lattice. Keep it passive. I want it fully deployed but invisible until the moment we turn on the lights. Copy that, Admiral. She's a big girl. We'll take it slow and steady. The reply was accompanied by a subtle vibration in the deck as massive mechanical arms began to extend the gossamer web of the lattice from the valediction's spine. The countdown in the holotank ticked past 68 hours. The first phase of Thorn's response was in motion. He wasn't just trying to save a convoy. He was prying open a closed book, forcing a civilization that only wrote in absolutes to read the footnotes. Their certainty is a cage. We are the key. The decoy drones, little more than engines with broadcast emitters, accelerated away from the fleet. They screamed into the void on a vector that was pure tactical folly, a textbook sacrificial run. On the Corps flagship's bridge, over Archon Valerius would be seeing exactly what his doctrine predicted, a lesser race buckling under pressure, making a desperate and foolish move. The console glare reflected in Thorn's eyes as he watched the false targets streak across the display. Core are taking the bait, Rostova reported, her voice tight. Multiple picket ships are pivoting to intercept the decoys. They're powering weapons. Their movements are sluggish, Thorne observed. Overconfident. They believe the engagement will be trivial. It will be, Rostova agreed. For them. The drones have no defensive capabilities. The destruction was swift and silent at this range, visible only as angry red blossoms on the tactical display. The core ships fired, and the human frigates vanished in bursts of simulated plasma. It was a clean, surgical, and utterly meaningless victory for the Directorate. We will mirror their arrogance back at them. But it served its purpose. A significant portion of the core blockade had shifted its attention, its sensor arrays now focused on the empty space where the decoys had been. They were confirming kills, logging their triumph, reinforcing their doctrine. A gap, a temporary thinning of their picket line, had opened on the opposite flank. It was small and would not last long. The window is open, Admiral Logos stated. Calculated duration, 97 seconds before their formation corrects. That's more than we need, Thorne said calmly. His suit's internal monitors registered his heartbeat, a slow and steady rhythm, against the quiet hum of the bridge. Signal the convoy. Full burn now. All ships execute. The 5 civilian transports and the medical frigate surged forward. Their engines flared, pushing them toward the fleeting gap in the iron cage. From the valediction, the mirror lattice, now fully unfurled and spanning hundreds of kilometers, came alive. The ledger must be balanced. Light for a moment bent. The human fleet, still holding its position, vanished from core sensors. In its place, a ghost fleet appeared, seemingly retreating in disarray. The lattice captured the light from Thorne's ships and projected it elsewhere, creating a perfect, large-scale illusion. To the core, it looked as if the human military, having lost its flanking frigates, was now in a full rout. Their doctrine had been validated once again. Over-Archon Valerius would not be looking for a subtle convoy slipping through a momentary gap. He would be focused on the grand tactical picture, the satisfying image of a broken enemy fleet fleeing before his might. The console glare on the valediction's bridge softened as the lattice did its work. The heat shimmer from its microscopic mirrors, too faint for any but the most sensitive instruments to detect. Convoy is through the gap, Rostova announced, a note of triumph in her voice. They are accelerating toward the jump point. The core haven't noticed. Their long-range sensors are still tracking our ghosts. A small cost was paid. The engine on one of the transports, the Pioneer's Dream, flared too brightly during the burn, a minor power surge that almost gave them away. Carter's voice was tense over the comm. Pioneer's Dream is showing a heat spike on its primary drive. We're venting plasma, but it left a temporary energy trail. It's faint, but if they rescan the area, they won't, Thorne said with confidence. Their doctrine tells them the battle is already won. Hold the line. Teach the lesson. The countdown clock now read 66 hours. The first test had been met. The convoy was safe, a fact that would be entered into the Third Fleet's public log. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. But the engagement was far from over. The Corps would soon realize their mistake. Their pride would be wounded, and a wounded predator is the most dangerous. The mysterious, rhythmic pulse from the Iron Edict continued its steady beat, an enigma tucked inside a monolith. Logos had been analyzing it continuously, stripping away layers of interference. Admiral, the AI's voice cut through the quiet satisfaction on the bridge. I have refined my analysis of the anomalous signal. It is a wide-spectrum broadcast, heavily encrypted. But the carrier wave, it is directed inward toward the core home systems. Thorne turned to the cobalt light. It's not a command frequency negative. The bandwidth is far too high for simple command and control. It is structured more like a public ledger or a live chronicle. The AI paused. They are not just fighting us, Admiral. They are broadcasting it. They are performing their ideology. The strategic picture snapped into a new, chilling focus. The blockade, the ultimatum, the rigid adherence to doctrine, it was all a performance. The core weren't just conquering systems. They were creating content, reinforcing their cultural identity through televised dominance. Over-Archon Valerius wasn't just a commander. He was a celebrity, and this was his show. And Thorn had just made him look like a fool in front of his entire civilization. The humiliation will be unbearable for them, Rostova said, her earlier triumph souring. They will not just respond, they will overreact. They will come for us with everything they have. I'm counting on it, Thorn said, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the holotank. The hum of the ship's life support seemed to grow louder in the ensuing silence. They think this is a story about their power. We are about to change the narrative. Brace for the reckoning. The Corps' response was not long in coming. When they discovered the convoy had vanished and their sensors had been deceived, their formation did not break in anger. It contracted, tightening into a perfect, menacing sphere of interlocking firepower. Then the ultimatum was reissued, not just to Thorn's fleet, but to the entire system. Every colony, every orbital station, every listening post received the message. This time the demand was unconditional surrender. The timer was gone. They have discarded the pretense of negotiation, Logos observed. Their posture is now purely punitive. All vessels are powering main weapons. They are advancing on our position. The holotank shimmered, updating with new tactical data. Red arrows representing the core fleet moved with a chilling, unified purpose. They were no longer a picket fence. They were a fist closing around the Third Fleet. They presented an open corridor directly toward their flagship, the Iron Edict. It was a clear invitation. A trap. They're daring us to make a decapitation strike. Rostova analyzed, her voice sharp. The corridor is an obvious kill box. They'll let us get close to the flagship and then collapse the formation, catching us in a crossfire from all sides. It is a stage set for a public execution. Chief Carter's voice crackled over the internal comm, laced with concern. Admiral, the lattice took a beating from the reflected energy during the decoy run. We've got microfractures on 12% of the mirror arrays. It will still function, but our projection fidelity is down. We can't pull the same trick twice. We won't need to, Thorn said. He watched the advancing enemy, the calculated corridor they offered. He saw the trap, but he also saw the performance. They didn't just want to destroy him. They wanted to do it in a way that would be broadcast and celebrated a demonstration of their doctrine's absolute superiority. The rhythmic pulse from the Iron Edict was stronger now, its tempo increasing like a rising heartbeat. He looked at the tactical display, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about ledgers and balance sheets. The Corps had presented their terms. Now he would present his. A young ensign on the bridge monitoring deep space communications suddenly stiffened. Sir, I'm picking up civilian chatter from the core homeworld. He sounded confused. It's encrypted, but parts of their public network are bleeding through. They're talking about the Solani incursion. That's us. There are public tallies, wagers on how long we'll last. This is not war. It is a spectator sport. Thorn felt a cold clarity settle over him. The pieces were all there, the public broadcast, the performative tactics, the overconfidence. The Corps' greatest strength, their unshakable monolithic doctrine, was about to become their greatest vulnerability. They had shown him their hand, not realizing he held a mirror. Logos, what is the maximum reflective capacity of the lattice in its current state? Thorn asked, his voice cutting through the tension. It can handle a single focused energy, burst up to 10 million terajoules before cascading failure, the AI replied instantly. Sustained exposure would be significantly less. And the particle lances on the core capital ships, each lance has a peak theoretical output of 9.5 million terajoules, Logos stated. Rostova's eyes widened slightly as she understood. Admiral, you can't mean to. To catch one, the sheer heat and radiation would overwhelm our shields. The feedback could fry the lattice and half our systems. We will not catch it. We will return it. Eva, plot a course. Take us directly into the kill box, Thorn commanded. The bridge crew froze for a heartbeat, a collective intake of breath. Ben, no, I want you to reconfigure the lattice. Don't unfurl it wide for deception. I want it focused. A concave dish aimed directly at the Iron Edict. Chief Carter hesitated for only a second. Aye, Admiral. Focusing the mirrors now. It's going to light us up like a nova on their scopes. Let them see us, Thorn said, his gaze locked on the approaching flagship. Let them see us coming. Logos, open a fleet-wide channel. I want every one of our ships to hear this. The cobalt light of the AI pulsed. Channel open, Admiral. Thorn's voice rang with absolute authority, echoing across the bridges of a dozen warships. This is the Admiral. The Corps Directorate has presented us with a bill assuming we would pay in surrender. We are going to settle this account. Our currency is their own conviction returned with interest. They built their church on a foundation of fear. We will show them the cracks in the stone. The human fleet moved. It did not surge or charge. It advanced with a slow, deliberate grace, heading straight down the throat of the enemy's trap. On the bridge of the Iron Edict, Over-Archon Valerius must have been watching with triumphant satisfaction. The foolish humans were behaving just as the doctrine predicted. Their lesser emotional nature was leading them to a glorious, broadcasted doom. He would be giving the order to his flanking ships, telling them to hold, to wait for the perfect moment to close the trap and annihilate the enemy commander. We are entering the kill box, Rostova reported, her voice steady despite the immense pressure. The ship's hull began to vibrate as it passed through the outer edges of the enemy's sensor range, a subtle, teeth-jarring hum. Multiple ships have weapons lock on us. They are waiting for the flagship's command to fire. They are waiting for their cue. Thorn corrected. He looked at the main viewer where the gray, brutalist form of the Iron Edict was now terrifyingly close. He could see the immense apertures of its primary particle lances, dark maws ready to spit oblivion. Lattice is in focus, Admiral Carter reported, his voice strained. We are painting the flagship with every mirror we have. It's like holding a magnifying glass up to a star. They think we are the sacrifice. They are mistaken. The rhythmic broadcast from the core flagship intensified the pulses, coming faster and faster. Logos projected a translation of the network chatter onto a secondary screen. It was a stream of patriotic fervor, praise for the Over-Archon, and public denunciations of the Solani cowards. The entire core civilization was watching, waiting for the climax of the show. Iron Edict is powering its main cannon. Rostova warned, her knuckles white on her console. Energy readings are off the scale. They're going for a one-shot kill. The air on the bridge grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and the thrum of power coursing through the valediction. Thorn stood perfectly still, a calm eye in the growing storm. He was not just a commander anymore. He was a fulcrum, a single point upon which the entire weight of a civilization's dogma was about to pivot. Steady, Thorn said, his voice a low anchor in the chaos. Hold the mirror. He watched the enemy ship, the dark lance ports, now glowing with terrifying energy. He saw the trap not as a kill box, but as a stage. And on that stage, the lead actor was about to deliver a line he had never rehearsed. Open the ledger. Let the universe bear witness. A crewman in the civilian transport, Horizon's Promise now safely away, and preparing for the jump to hyperspace, was patching a cracked coolant line. He worked in the quiet hum of the engine room, the ship's vibrations a comforting sign of their escape. Over a jury-rigged comm receiver, he could hear the encrypted fleet communications from the battle they had left behind. He paused, listening to the calm, measured commands of Admiral Thorne, a man he would never meet. He and everyone on this ship owed their lives to that voice. He whispered a silent prayer of thanks before turning back to his work, ensuring the promise of a new dawn for his family would not be broken by a faulty seal. The forward lance on the Iron Edict discharged. A torrent of incandescent energy, a beam of pure weaponized physics erupted from the core flagship. It was a spear of light meant to obliterate the valediction and serve as the final glorious shot for a captive audience. The beam crossed the distance between the two ships in less than a second. It never struck the valediction. Instead, it hit the mirror lattice. Their greatest weapon became our perfect defense. For a fraction of a millisecond, the space in front of the human fleet burned with the light of a man-made sun. The lattice, angled with impossible precision by Logos, caught the full force of the particle beam. It was not a shield designed to absorb or deflect, but a mirror designed to reflect. The beam, containing all the arrogant power of the core directorate, was turned back upon its source. The crew on the valediction's bridge were momentarily blinded by the glare their visors and the bridge viewports instantly polarizing to near black. A wave of heat washed over the ship, and warning klaxons blared as localized sections of the hull plating flash-heated past tolerance. The ship groaned under the strain, a deep, resonant protest from stressed metal and gravitonic plates. It was the only cost. A few scorched plates and a nearly melted lattice. When vision returned, the scene in the holotank was irrevocably changed. The particle beam had struck the Iron Edict dead center. The core flagship, whose shields were calibrated to project outward against enemy fire, was utterly defenseless against its own weapon. The beam punched through its prow, vaporizing armor and annihilating the forward sections of the ship in a silent, blossoming explosion of vaporized metal and plasma. Their ultimatum was returned to sender. The core fleet was paralyzed. The perfect interlocking sphere of their formation faltered as their command ship shuddered and broke apart. On their bridges, commanders and crew would be staring in disbelief, their screens showing the impossible. Their doctrine had no contingency for this. Their infallible weapon had been turned on them. Their over-archon, the star of their broadcast, was likely a cloud of superheated atoms. But the most devastating blow was not the physical one. Logos. Thorne ordered, his voice cutting through the stunned silence on his own bridge. Take the core's broadcast frequency. You have the encryption keys you skimmed from their network chatter. Seize it. Compliance, the AI replied. The cobalt light flared. I have control of the broadcast network. Patch me through. Live to every screen in their empire. Thorne stepped forward into the center of the bridge, his face set like granite. Show them the tactical log. Show them our sensor readings. Show them the convoy we saved. Show them everything. A new column was added to their public tally. Across the core directorate, on countless public displays and private screens, the triumphant spectacle of the over-archon's victory vanished. It was replaced by the cold, hard data from the human fleet. They saw the blockade. They saw the civilian transports. They saw the ultimatum issued in their name. And then they saw the tactical replay, the feint, the escape, the trap, and the final shocking reflection. They saw their invincible flagship destroyed by its own hand. There was no speech, no declaration of victory from the humans. There was only data. The numbers, the truth, the unassailable mathematics of their doctrine's failure. Eva Thorne said softly. Broadcast a single message to the remaining core vessels. No threats. No demands. Rostova looked up, understanding dawning in her eyes. She typed the command. The message was simple, translated into the harsh, angular script of the core. It contained only 2 words. The lesson is over. We do not conquer. We teach. The core fleet did not respond with fury. It responded with confusion. Ships broke formation. Some retreated. Others simply drifted their commanders, waiting for orders that would never come. The monolithic structure of their will had been fractured. The broadcast, the tool of their ideological reinforcement, was now the instrument of their humiliation, showing a repeating loop of their flagship's self-destruction to a stunned populace. The rhythmic pulse was gone. In its place, there was only the silent static of a severed command link. Admiral Logos stated its calm voice, a stark contrast to the monumental event that had just transpired. I am detecting systemic communication failures across the core fleet. Their command hierarchy has collapsed. Multiple ships are signaling withdrawal to the jump point. The holotank showed the enemy fleet, once a perfect instrument of intimidation, dissolving into a disorganized mob. The trap had not only failed, it had inverted, caging them in their own bewilderment. Their system was built on a single pillar, and we showed them it was hollow. Thorne watched the enemy retreat for a long moment. There was no triumph in his expression, only a profound weariness. He had not sought this confrontation, but he had been determined to end it. He had held a mirror up to a bully, and the bully had punched himself in the face. The cost was a damaged lattice, and some strained hull plating a small price for 200,000 lives, and a foundational lesson in humility. Ben, what's the status of the lattice? Thorne asked, turning his attention to the practicalities of the aftermath. She's a wreck. Admiral, came the engineer's tired voice. 30% of the mirror arrays are slagged. Another 40 are offline. We can't fold it back in. We'll have to jettison the damaged sections. It'll take weeks to repair, assuming we can even source the components out here. The cost of the victory was now being calculated not in lives, but in time and resources. Log it, Thorne said. He turned to Rostova. Track their retreat. Make sure they all leave the system. Do not fire unless fired upon. He looked out the main viewport, at the drifting debris of what was once the Iron Edict, a fresh scar on the face of the void. He had exposed the lie at the heart of the core doctrine, but he knew this was not the end. An ideology so deeply ingrained would not die from a single shock. It would fester. It would adapt. It would seek retribution. The reckoning was complete, but the account was not yet closed. The bridge of the valediction was unnervingly quiet. The adrenaline of the confrontation had subsided, leaving a vacuum filled only by the soft hum of life support and the distant rhythmic clang of repair crews jettisoning the ruined sections of the mirror lattice. On the main holotank, the red icons of the core fleet were shrinking, pulling back toward the system's jump point in a disordered rout. They were not a fleet anymore, just a collection of frightened ships running from a ghost. Rostova stood at her station, her posture still rigid, as if expecting a sudden counterattack. All hostile vessels have now crossed the system's edge, she reported, her voice flat with exhaustion. They are gone, Admiral. Thorn nodded slowly, the reflection of the starfield sliding across his tired eyes. Log the engagement. Mark the convoy FCV-77 as secure, and send our casualty report. Casualties, sir. Rostova turned. We didn't lose anyone. Minor injuries in engineering from the heat surge, but... The lattice is a casualty, Eva Thorne corrected gently. Our primary strategic advantage in this sector is now drifting scrap. That has a cost, and it must be recorded in the ledger. He looked at the empty space where the Iron Edict had been, just as their losses must be. They wrote the threat. We wrote the receipt. Logos, whose cobalt light had remained a steady, calming presence throughout the fight, now pulsed with a new urgency. Admiral, my analysis of the captured core broadcast network is yielding results. Their internal communications are in chaos. I have isolated what appears to be a record of their central governing body, a consensus reacting to the live feed. A new window opened in the holotank, displaying translated fragments of core text. They were frantic accusatory. Words like doctrinal failure, unforeseen variable, and political contagion appeared again and again. Thorne saw it instantly. This wasn't just a military defeat for them. It was a crisis of faith. Their power isn't just military, he mused aloud. It's ideological. The consensus rules because the doctrine is seen as perfect, infallible. We didn't just break a flagship. We broke a promise of absolute strength. Rostova added, her gaze fixed on the frantic messages. What happens when an entire culture built on that promise sees it shatter live across their world? We have planted a seed of doubt in the garden of their certainty. Before anyone could answer, a new alert chimed sharp and insistent. It was a priority signal from the system's edge. Not from the retreating ships, but from the jump point itself. A massive energy signature was blooming far larger than the first fleet. Multiple jump space apertures opening, the sensor officer called out, his voice strained. Magnitude. It's a full battle fleet. At least 3 times the size of the first one. Directorate markings. They're not running. They were waiting. The holotank populated with a terrifying swarm of new red icons. They were fresh, fully armed, and arranged in a flawless, aggressive wedge formation. This was not a panicked response. This was the other shoe dropping. This was the fist inside the velvet glove. It was a screening force. Rostova breathed, her face paling slightly. They were testing us. The lead vessel, a behemoth that dwarfed even the fallen Iron Edict broadcast on all frequencies. This time there was no ultimatum for surrender. No countdown. Just a cold, synthesized voice that spoke in perfect, unaccented human standard. Human vessel valediction. You have been judged guilty of doctrinal heresy against the core directorate. Your lesson is rejected. Your existence is an error. The charge for this error is cessation. There will be no negotiation. There will be no survivors. They rejected the lesson, so the exam begins. Deep in the engine room of the destroyer Steadfast, a young technician named Anya Petrova was running a post-engagement diagnostic. Coolant hissed from a recently sealed pipe, the scent of ozone still sharp in the air. Her console chimed with the new fleet-wide alert, and she watched the tactical display update with the massive new enemy fleet. A cold dread settled in her stomach. She looked at a small, faded photograph taped to the side of her monitor, a picture of her and her wife on a shoreline, the sun setting behind them. She touched the image gently, a silent promise to see that sunset again. The ship's deck plates vibrated with a new energy as the captain called for battle stations, and she turned back to her work, her fear channeled into focus. She had a job to do. Thorn stared at the new disposition, his mind racing. The Corps had learned from their mistake. There was no single flagship to target, no obvious corridor or trap. This was a wave of pure force designed to crush, not to intimidate. They were done with performance. This was about erasure. They've abandoned the pretense of a public spectacle, Thorn said, his voice dangerously quiet. This is punishment. Our mirror lattice is non-operational, Carter reported grimly over the comm. We have no grand tricks left in the bag, Admiral. We have our ships, our guns, and our shields. The numbers are not in our favor. Then we must change the battlefield, Thorn declared. He gestured to the holotank, his finger tracing a line toward the system's massive ringed gas giant Poseidon. The numbers may favor them in open space, but in there, he tapped the swirling, chaotic representation of the planet's rings. The numbers don't matter as much as nerve. A plan forged in desperation is the sharpest blade of all. Rostova saw the strategy immediately. The rings, ice rock dust, a nightmare for sensors and targeting locks. We could use the debris for cover, mask our approach. More than that, Thorn said, a glint in his eye. We can turn their own formation against them. They are advancing in a perfect, rigid wedge. They expect to sweep us before them. Logos, I want you to plot a course deep into the densest part of the Poseidon rings, and I want you to start broadcasting. The AI's light pulsed. Broadcast what, Admiral? The complete, unedited recording of our last engagement, including their internal consensus communications. Put it on a continuous open loop. Let this new fleet see exactly how their predecessors failed. Let them see the panic of their own leaders. The truth is a weapon that never runs out of ammunition. They will see it as a taunt, Rostova warned. It will enrage them, Goodthorn said. Anger makes commanders predictable. They'll charge in after us, eager to silence the broadcast. Their perfect formation will be compressed, distorted by the ring system. They'll be so focused on the chase they won't be looking at their own flanks. The human fleet turned as one engine's flaring as they raced toward the majestic swirling giant. On their heels, the immense core fleet accelerated, a wave of steel and fury, intent on scrubbing the insult from the void. The broadcast began a ghost of their recent failure playing out for all to see, an echo of hubris in the face of overwhelming force. They entered the rings. The universe outside the viewport dissolved into a chaotic, mesmerizing blizzard of ice and rock. Chunks of frozen methane the size of mountains drifted past their shadows, playing across the bridge. The ship's hull plating began to ping and groan as smaller debris glanced off the shields, a constant nerve-wracking percussion. Hold fast against the storm. The core fleet is entering the rings, Rostova reported. Her eyes glued to the tactical display, which was now flickering with sensor ghosts and false readings from the dense debris. Their formation is already starting to bunch up. They're reducing speed to avoid collisions, but their command structure is forcing them to maintain a tight wedge. They are slaves to their own geometry, Thorn observed. Logos, are you tracking their command ship identified? The Iron Resolve. It remains in the center rear of the formation, protected. They have learned that much. Then we won't target their head, Thorn said. We'll cut off their legs. He turned to his tactical officer. Eva, signal the destroyers, Steadfast and Orion. They are to break off from the main group using that large Shepherd moon for sensor cover. Once the bulk of the core fleet passes their position, they will emerge and engage the trailing ships from the rear. A bold stroke to unbalance the board. It was a classic pincer movement, but executed in reverse. He was letting the enemy surround him, counting on the chaos of the rings to hide his own smaller, more agile ships until the trap was sprung. The deck vibrated continuously now, a deep resonant hum that was both the ship's own engines and the impact of a million tiny worlds against its shields. "Core Vanguard is closing," Rostova announced, her voice tight. "They have weapons lock, 20 seconds to effective range." The forward viewport lit up with the brilliant, silent flashes of particle beams and plasma bolts. They were firing blind, trying to saturate the area, hoping to hit a target they could not clearly see. Explosions blossomed among the ice fields, vaporizing asteroids and sending shimmering clouds of superheated gas billowing through the rings. Steady Thorn commanded, his voice an anchor of calm. "Return fire with point defense cannons only. I want to draw them deeper in. Make them commit. They believe they are the hunters. They are walking into the abyss." The Valediction and its escorts danced through the debris field, a deadly ballet choreographed by Logos. The larger core ships were clumsy in this environment, their rigid doctrine preventing them from adapting to the three-dimensional chaotic terrain. They were a hammer trying to strike a needle in a hurricane. Thorn watched the tactical plot, his eyes tracking the progress of the enemy wedge as it pushed deeper into the rings, past the hidden position of his destroyers. "Steadfast and Orion are in position," Rostova confirmed. "The rear of the core formation is now exposed. Execute," Thorn ordered. From behind the cover of a massive pockmarked moonlet, the two human destroyers surged forward. Their weapons held silent until this moment erupted in a furious volley of torpedoes and railgun slugs. They slammed into the engines and weapon emplacements of the rearmost core cruisers' ships that were focused entirely on the chase ahead. Their perfect formation became a perfect prison. Confusion ripped through the core fleet. Their rear guard, suddenly under attack from an impossible direction, faltered. To turn and face the threat, they had to break the sacred wedge formation, fouling the firing lines of the ships in front of them. The commander of the Iron Resolve now faced an agonizing choice: press the attack on Thorn and sacrifice his rear, or halt the advance to deal with the new threat, giving the main human fleet a reprieve. He chose both, and in doing so achieved neither. The forward ships slowed, while the rear ships tried to maneuver in the impossibly tight confines of the ring and their own formation. The perfect wedge dissolved into a tangled knot of confusion. "The trap is sprung," Thorn said, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "All ships full attack. Target their drives and reactors. Disable them. Do not destroy them unless absolutely necessary." Logos. "I want you to broadcast a new message. Ready, Admiral? For every core ship we disable, add a line item to their public ledger. Label it Cost of Doctrinal Inflexibility. Calculate the material and crew cost for each disabled vessel and display it. Live. A reckoning delivered not in fire but in arithmetic. The battle turned into a brutal close-range brawl. Human ships, smaller and more agile, darted between asteroids, striking at the vulnerable joints of the larger, clumsier core vessels. The rings were alight with weapons fire, the silent chaos punctuated by the brilliant flashes of ruptured shields and exploding reactors. The broadcast continued relentlessly, a cold, clinical accounting of the core's mounting losses, streamed directly to their homeworld. They were not just losing a battle. Their entire philosophy of war was being publicly audited and found wanting. Victory, however, demanded its price. The destroyer, steadfast in its daring rear attack, drew the focused fire of 3 core cruisers. Its shields buckled under the onslaught. A particle beam sliced through its aft engineering section, crippling its main drive and venting atmosphere into the void. Warning klaxons shrieked across the Valediction's bridge. "The Steadfast is hit," Rostova yelled. "Severe damage, they're losing power and life support." Thorn's face hardened. He saw the tactical situation. The Steadfast was adrift, a sitting duck. To save it, he would have to pull ships away from the main engagement, risking the entire battle. The cold calculus of command warred with the moral imperative to leave no one behind. It was a test. Their doctrine demands sacrifice. Ours demands salvation. Divert the cruiser Argent and the frigate Lancer Thorn ordered without hesitation. They are to provide covering fire for the Steadfast. Get a rescue team ready. Ben, can we get a remote power transfer to them to stabilize their life support? It'll be risky. Admiral Carter's voice crackled. We'd have to drop our own shields to project the beam. We'd be naked. Do it, Thorn commanded. The conflict triangle, his own morality versus the cold logic of the situation, had resolved. He would not become the monster he was fighting. He would not sacrifice his people on the altar of strategy. This, too, was a part of the lesson. The valediction itself maneuvered to shield the stricken destroyer, its massive hull absorbing a volley of plasma that sent shudders through the entire frame. For a terrifying 30 seconds, its shields were down, a fragile umbilical of energy reaching out to breathe life back into the dying Steadfast. It was a moment of supreme vulnerability, an act of faith in the middle of a firefight. And in that moment, the battle's tide truly turned. The Corps commander on the Iron Resolve, watching a fleet carrier deliberately expose itself to save a single destroyer, could not comprehend the act. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was a violation of every tactical principle his doctrine held sacred. And it was this act more than the battle losses that seemed to break his spirit. His fleet was in shambles, his formation shattered, and his enemy was displaying a coherence and loyalty that his own rigid command structure could not match. The firing from the core ships became sporadic, uncoordinated. Some began to retreat, attempting to navigate the treacherous rings in a desperate flight. Others simply shut down their main drives, signaling a passive surrender. The iron will of the Directorate's punitive fleet had melted away in the face of a strategy it could not understand and a morality it could not counter. The battle for the Poseidon Rings was over. Their iron resolve had rusted from within. In the aftermath, the human fleet was battered but intact. The Steadfast was saved, though its wounds were deep, a long dark scar scorched across its hull. The cost of victory was etched into its very metal. Rescue operations were underway for the crews of the disabled core ships, a gesture of mercy that served as the final silent sentence in Thorn's lesson. The broadcast to the core homeworld fell silent, the ledger of their losses left on screen for all to see. Hours later, as the last of the salvage and rescue operations were concluding, a new signal came from the core system. It was not a military channel. It was a civilian frequency, a hailing request from the core consensus itself. The tone was not hostile, not arrogant. It was subdued. Logos translated the message for the bridge. They are not addressing the Third Fleet. They are addressing the authority we represent. They are requesting the terms for a formal cessation of hostilities. They state that effective immediately, the Directorate's ultimatum doctrine has been suspended by order of the civilian consensus. The public ledger had worked. The political cost had become too high for the military to continue. The precedent was set. Thorn let out a long, slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He looked at the holotank, now clear of enemy icons, showing only the green symbols of his own ships, their positions anchored in the silent, glittering rings of Poseidon. They had faced 2 ultimatums, 2 fleets, and an entire civilization's unbending will. They had answered not with overwhelming force, but with irrefutable truth. He watched as the rescue shuttle's tiny points of light moved between the disabled core vessels, their searchlights sweeping across the silent, wounded hulls. The tally on the main screen confirmed no human lives lost, though dozens were wounded, and 2 ships would require months of repair. The enemy was defeated. Their ideology fractured their power to threaten innocent lives, with unanswerable demands broken. They had built their empire on the belief that the final word was a weapon, a decree that reality must obey. They spoke and worlds trembled. We simply showed them that the universe doesn't listen to demands. It keeps a ledger. And that ledger must always eventually be balanced, not with words, but with consequence. The universe does not bargain, but it always keeps the books.